Welcome to Just Think About It with Nadine and Ben. Before we start our conversation, we have two key requests. First, if you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe via Apple, Spotify, LinkedIn, or your platform of choice. Second, we appreciate any kind notes and feedback, as well as you letting your friends know where to find us. Today, we are thrilled to introduce you to Amy Andersen, the CEO of Linx Dating. In 21 years of working with the most eligible men and women of the Bay Area and beyond, Amy has established herself as the premier matchmaker. She doesn't actively market her services. Instead, people find Amy. She's one of the most well-networked individuals and has a keen understanding of people's personality types, drive, ambition, and other key factors that we're going to get into today, driving personal and professional happiness. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me be here. It's delightful to talk to both of you. I'm honored to participate today.
We have so many questions to get into with you, but before we delve into them, it'd be great to learn about your background and the founding of Linx. Would you share a brief history for our audience?
Absolutely. So I developed the idea for Linx Dating when I was initially living in Silicon Valley. I'm born in San Francisco, raised in Marin. And back in 2000 timeframe, I found myself in a really serious relationship with kind of a prototypical Silicon Valley guy in Palo Alto. And I had never really spent much time in Palo Alto prior. And all of a sudden I'm in this relationship and meeting a lot of his contemporaries, all of whom were highly educated, really interesting guys in Silicon Valley. Yet the common thread of all of them was that they were all very single and searching for a match. And for whatever reason would complain to me about the dating scene and want me to set them up. So back then, again, 2000 timeframe, this is a really long time ago, I was trying to absorb this information and figure out why the social landscape was so unusual. Kind of as the expression goes, the odds are good, but the goods are odd in Silicon Valley. And then that's when I saw something very similar up in San Francisco with a lot of my female friends who I had done a lot of volunteer work with through the San Francisco Junior League. And a lot of my female friends were complaining to me similarly about their dating lives or lack thereof, and just saying, Amy, where are the guys? And so for me as a young entrepreneur back then, that was really the genesis of Linx Dating as we know it today, bridging the gap and identifying these two different demographics in the San Francisco Bay Area, bridging the gap and creating those opportunities. So that was my light bulb moment back in 2000. And I knew that there was something really unique here. And then I did a ton of research. I was shocked that nobody was capitalizing on this and thinking to myself, oh my God, I've got to figure this out. So for the next almost 3 years, I did a ton of research. I was working in a completely different industry. I was working at Merrill Lynch in private client services, cold calling 200 high net worth people every day, miserable basically, but I learned some really good skills from that. And then I quit my job in December of 2003 and started my business. And I have honestly never looked back. It's been one of the greatest decisions of my life.
That's amazing. And it's funny that the delta, that 45-minute delta between the valley and the city, you really capitalized on that. And the fact that people wouldn't venture out of their area to find love. So that's kind of an interesting situation that you found yourself recognizing very early.
Yeah. And you know what, Nadine? It still remains true. People are provincial, like they're stuck in their neighborhoods. And I find a lot of them are not willing to kind of venture out. And it boggles my mind almost every day. I'm like, wait, you live in Selma, yet you're not willing to explore an opportunity with somebody who could be your future partner who lives in Woodside. Are you serious? So people are funny that way though. But so the principle remains true to this day.
And again, before we get into the details, could you describe for us what is Linx's approach to matchmaking overall, and what would you think makes Linx special or different from the other options out there?
Well, there's certainly these days so many different choices. There's dating apps, there's online dating, organic meeting in real life, and working events, and then this whole industry of matchmaking. Domestically, there's something like 2,500 matchmakers. So the market has just blown up ever since I started. People choose Linx for a variety of different reasons, but some of the unique value adds of the business would be certainly, I would say, first and foremost, the brand has never deviated from the original ethos of what Linx stands for, which is working with really interesting, dynamic, educated professionals who are all commitment and marriage minded. So that right there is an attractive feature for the types of clients that I represent. Beyond that, a huge selling point for a lot of people is the privacy. Privacy is paramount. I'm dealing with really confidential information. So keeping people's information discreet, private, off social media, tight-lipped, locked up, all that stuff is very important. In fact, my staff doesn't even have access to my client's information. They've never seen the client database. I'm the one who only obtains that information. So they have never logged in. They've never seen it. They don't even know that really there's a database because they've never seen it. So my clients love that. They're like, oh my God, Amy, you're telling me that you're the only one who's going to be kind of privy to this really sensitive information. And I tell them absolutely, because I take that very seriously. So I think the privacy component is a big one. I think the other unique feature that really elevates this experience as compared to apps or anything else out there in the marketplace is the access. I've worked so hard for the last 21, 22 years, however long I've been doing this, a long time, to create this really robust network. And that has been earned through really hard work of getting referrals of like-minded people and vetting them. So my clients love the opportunity to tap into a totally different network than they might have otherwise in their life. So those are some of the features, and I can get into through our conversation, the personalization and what I do behind the scenes that really makes this very special for our clients.
Great. And you've been in the business for decades. Amy, what are transitions that you witnessed? Because I think, walking through the industry before we delve into your processes and maybe the status of candidates today versus before, but are there some transitions that you've witnessed and experienced in the dating matchmaking worlds that, come to the forefront?
Yeah, I think that for the consumer, I think people are confused. I just think there's this paradox of choice. So for prospects within the matchmaking umbrella, they are flooded with information and a lot of misinformation. There's just a lot of smoke and mirrors within this industry, and it can be very hard for them to ascertain who are the real players in this space, who are kind of the phony no balonies, and who to stay away from and who should I consider hiring, because there's just a lot of information and it's a very unregulated industry. So I think it's very confusing. Now, in terms of, as I've seen, the dating industry evolve and matchmaking industry evolve over the decades, I think the interesting thing is that, for me in working with clients, I think a lot of people are just confused in terms of how to act in the context of dating. So the notion of kind of traditional gender roles of how a man behaves in the context of dates and how a woman should act, that's been really polluted. And a lot of that is confusion stemming from the rise of dating apps and how behavior is kind of thrown into a blender with that. Women are finding themselves having to do the asking out and be the so-called aggressor, and they don't want to do that, but the guys are not asking them out. So they've had to kind of take ownership of that. And so people are they're like, I don't know what to do. Should I open her door? Should I pay for the dinner? The women ask me, should I buy him dinner? And I'm like, let's drill this down to a simple science, right? And so for me, that is a big thing that I've seen where people are just, again, consumer and deciding on different choices of who to sign up with or what methods to kind of employ as part of their arsenal of dating resources. They're very confused. And then when it comes to behavior in the context of dating, even more confused.
You say you started 20 years ago, which is amazing. By the way, congratulations on anybody who's been in business for 20 years. Like,
Thank you. Thank you.
My driver at that point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, because back then, what did you have? Was eHarmony? Was eHarmony around then? So,
eHarmony,
maybe talk
Match.com.
about the evolution of that. Okay, wait, eHarmony and JDate, and then sure there's one or two, but like the HTML was a tough ask, right? There was a huge leap when Tinder came around. It was like, hey, swipe left, swipe right, and then maybe that was a little too convenient because now you're commoditizing humans in some sense. You're not. They're not real people. They're just a playing card. And you're like, you're hot, you're not, whatever. Which is, by the way, that is the genesis of the Facebook, of the company that's $1 trillion. They literally were like, is she hot? Is she not hot? And that was the beginning idea behind that. So, okay, so how has your business evolved as those easier, better UX, easier to use competition has come around?
Mm-hmm. Well, what's been interesting about it is that the people who built those apps are my clients, right? Because they are not finding success. Are you hot? Are you not? Swipe this way, swipe that way. They're like, this is not great, right? This sucks. So I'm willing to pay the premium to have a human figure it out. And I think that is the other huge attractive feature for my clients, is that the humans doing the deciding, not an algorithm, right? And also making it a human process where people are not commodities, right? Of, trading different people or swiping on people and making people feel inferior or icky. Right? That's a pretty terrible feeling. So this is a completely different approach. And that's been, I think for me, that's kind of been the irony of all ironies, is the people who built Match.com or were the original engineers building eHarmony or Hinge. Those have been the people that are either in my database as inventory and kind of vetted inventory as kind of match candidates, or they become my clients. So it's hugely ironic, I think.
How much of what you do is coaching versus connecting, right? Like how much, like if I come to you and I'm like, hey, I'm from Wisconsin, I got a little scruffy beard, I'm kind of smart, but maybe I'm a little bit of, rough around the edges. Is there that, or is it just the access to your network? The match, like, what do you think? Or does it vary by case?
Well, Ben, I would definitely say, don't say I'm kind of smart. So that part of my coaching, alarm bells were going off thinking, oh my gosh, like you got to be more confident, right? Because that's what women are looking for. So
he's not lacking in any confidence, Amy. He's playing for you right now, but yes.
So absolutely. The access is the first big thing, but then beyond actually kind of teeing up the right match for the clients, so much of my job goes far beyond actually figuring out the right match and following through on that so they're out there successfully dating, and it becomes largely a game of strategy and coaching. That is something that I have really leaned into as my role for my clients. Like I view my job as that of founder and CEO, businesswoman and matchmaker, but also confidant and coach, in some cases, psychiatrist and therapist, and fill in the blank with the different descriptions. But coaching and strategy is a very large part of this, where, I can tee up the right match for you and send you out there. But if you're not prepared and feeling good about it and confident, and then find yourself kind of stumbling around, that's going to kick you, into the dirt really hard. So some coaching is definitely part of it. But then once your, potential relationship starts progressing, and let's say things are getting more serious, you're a month in, you're 2 months in, you're talking about heavy subjects, it is not atypical for my clients or for myself to proactively reach out to them and have a conversation about, I want you to be thinking about this, time to avoid this, now really lean into this, right? So much is the strategy to really enable them to get to the success and the finish line ultimately that they're looking for, and think about things a different way. I provide my own perspective. Ultimately, it's up to them to make their own choices and decisions, but I want them to know that there's a really great resource to tap into if they want.
Amy, before we get off dating apps, one of the things that I appreciate when we were talking to you ahead of time was that really about looking for clients who are serious, right? They're
Sure.
finding love, finding that match, and that differentiates you and your firm. And as we think about dating apps, where some people on there might be looking for that, some may not, as we know, what role do you think they should play in an individual's overall dating strategy? And I guess maybe you can separate it between if someone's your client or if they're not your client. Is it different under those circumstances? And should they?
Absolutely. I think anybody who's out there dating needs to date intelligently and strategically. And so if somebody is dating vis-a-vis the apps, number one, good for you, because you're putting yourself out there, you're practicing, and you are seeing who you respond best to and seeing who you feel that chemistry with. But a big thing I tell people is before you meet in person, consider having a phone call. I think it's really important because the purpose of the phone call is like when you're about to make an investment, right? You're going to do your due diligence. You better hope you do, right? Because if you don't, the investment could fail. Well, same thing when it comes to matters of the heart, this investment into your heart, do your due diligence. So have a list of some questions where the purpose of the phone call is to not only hear their voice, see if they show up for the call, see what they're like, right? Even like do FaceTime with them to see if they're matching the profile picture and they're kind of mapping to that and they are who they say they are, right? And then begin to weave in some important questions as part of your screening mechanism. It's a really important way to kind of quickly ascertain, is this person worth meeting in person, or based on what he or she just told me, it's time to probably eliminate them from the running, right? And you're going to maintain that consistency and that plan. And I think when people stick to that, that's when they realize they can date intelligently and also be really smart about who they meet and how they spend their time. I get a lot of people that tell me, God, Amy, I just met somebody on Hinge and, he made me sit there for like 3 hours and was just talking and never asked me questions. And then I realized he's not even really looking for anything serious. He told me he's, in play mode and not even looking for a committed relationship. And he's not even done with his divorce. And that's something in my value system that's really important, Amy. I'm like, God, you could have achieved that way earlier on and not put yourself through that misery of listening to this person for 3 hours with a simple 5-minute phone call. So I would say anybody doing dating apps, definitely be really smart about how you're dating and how you spend your time and who you choose to meet in person. You are in the driver's seat. You are in control of your life and steering the ship, but you need to take ownership of that.
And maybe that's...
And, the last part about the apps here is how do you compare them? Match, Hinge, Bumble, Tinder. I mean, you mentioned there's Coffee and Bagels, League, eHarmony. I don't know. There's so many of them. What would you advise someone if they are going to go on an app? Do they go across all of them? That seems like a suck, or what do you do?
Truth is, they're all the same. I mean, Ben and I were chatting about this. The truth is they really are the same. And it's the same users. It's the same kind of people who are on all of them. That's what our research shows. So I think kind of choose the one that looks best suited for you, right? I mean, I personally like Hinge based on our team's research. We think that that is a strong one for single people. I like the UI. I think that there seems to be a higher correlation with people who are actually desirous of a relationship compared to other apps. So I'd say if you're gonna throw your chips in with one, probably choose Hinge. But the truth is they all serve the same function and it's often the same people on all of them. Our research shows us that when one person signs up with Hinge or, fill in the blank app, they typically sign up with 3 others. So it's usually they're kind of active on 4 different apps, which can be very complicating, right? Because then people can be too diluted, not know who to focus on. And again, that is the era that we're living in, which can complicate what I do, especially when somebody kind of comes in with that mindset and also comes in energetically, just being fatigued. They are tired from it. So
yeah, and I would agree with you. The Hinge, I've had some success on there post-divorce. And I think what it is they make you answer a couple questions the way you would, right? Like a scalable version of Amy. Like, hey, answer a few questions. Let's see if you can give a witty answer. You know what I mean? And then let's give some pictures of you. So I have 5 or 6 pictures. You know, it's not just one, which is like your best picture. Like, let me see like 6 pictures of you and like you doing different things in different places. So you can gain a little bit of a perspective on who they are. No, obviously it's still just an image, right? It's still just marketing
Right.
at its core, but it's better than one picture on Tinder, which is swipe left, swipe right. Right. And so I think
Exactly.
it's like a dumb, not dumb, but like a scaled down version of what you do. Like I need to know who you are. I need some questions. I need more than just one picture and I'm 6'4". You know what I mean? Like, or so, whatever. And so I think that that's an interesting thing. But when we talk about the apps, has that been something that's like basically helped or hurt your business or indifferent?
It's helped my business because it really reinforces the desire for a human to figure out an appropriate match for somebody. Right. I think the algorithm is a useful tool. I think that AI and algorithms are going to continue to further develop and hone what they do best. And that is a great resource. But I think, my clients and the level at which I'm operating has reinforced the desire, the strong desire for the process of what I do and the human choosing. I think the human wins. I think the human is the choice when it comes to love, right? I'm not dissing apps altogether. I think it's a great resource and it's a fabulous way to practice. And who knows, I'd be pompous to say, Linx is going to be responsible for making all matches, all the time, because when I encourage my clients to check out Hinge or, get on another one, I don't know if they're going to meet the love of their life that way. And, of course, I'd like to be responsible for doing it myself, but they might very well meet somebody fabulous through that. And people meet all the time through the apps, right? So nobody knows.
Yeah. And
Before we get into this, I think that that's a really, really interesting area. One of the things that you've touched on is people navigating in real life, right? And you can see it on TikTok, Instagram, wherever, or, pick your news article, that people don't seem to be navigating that very well. Do you know why or why not? Like what's happening there? And given that it seems to be an area of whether it's discomfort or lack of ability, maybe the pandemic caused some of it, I don't know. But what kind of advice do you give to people if they don't navigate that very well?
I think like anything in life, people have to remember the context of what they're doing. What is the purpose of the dating app or signing up with a matchmaker? The purpose is to ultimately find a great, hopefully healthy, vivacious, wonderful relationship. And what is it all about? It's dating, it's courtship, it's chivalry, it's relationships, it's intimacy, it's emotional intimacy, all those wonderful things, right? But it's about dating. So remember the context of it. And I think a lot of people, frankly, they forget what that means. And maybe that is the pandemic, where people were so isolated and kind of spinning in their head, alone, overthinking everything, that now when people are out there meeting, they forget how to date. They forget how to flirt. They forget how to kind of lean in with that energy, right? And laugh at jokes and not take themselves too seriously and not analyze everything. And so I think that can really hinder people from finding relationships when they don't approach it the right way. And that's often where my coaching comes into play as well, just helping people kind of frame things a little bit clearer and a little bit in more of a simple way, remembering why they're doing this. My motto is do what your grandparents did. Chances are your grandpa didn't ghost your grandma, and chances are, they weren't playing games. And it's like, if your grandma was interested in your grandpa when he asked her out, she let him know. There was a strong signal there. They didn't have weeks pass where she's like, well, I guess, and let me just wait another 7 days to get back to him. There was a clear interest. It was a simple process, right? So when I think people break things down to a very simple process of how to act in the context of dating and not overcomplicate all of this, then those are the people that end up in relationships. And there's also, I can stack some more layers onto what makes my couple successful in the conversation, but in the very early stages, keeping things simple.
And so, Amy, we were talking about before the time element, right? None of us can scale time. You're in the heart of, hey, let's scale it, right? So your business, you have a difficulty in scaling it, but also your clients, you're trying to not make them waste time, right? So if I'm on Hinge or I'm on whatever, I go on too many dates, it's just a waste. So you're like, hey, I'm trying to save you from that, or save you from a relation might be bad. So I'm trying to save you some time because we only have so much time in our life. So the time component of your business is an interesting one in the sense that in some ways it limits your scalability, but it's one of the huge value offers that you offer to your clients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it feels like when we start this process, it's like in a vacuum, right? It's really intense. And what I love is my process of vetting and ultimately getting to that kind of tipping point of starting to work with a new client. Like they've done so much work typically on themselves. Like it's not uncommon where they've done therapy, they've chatted, with friends about, finding love again or finding love altogether. They've worked on themselves. They've read self-help books. They're in a good place in their life and they've gone through my process. They've been willing to kind of play ball with me up into this point of like doing my homework, getting some photos done, like doing the application, signing a contract, wiring the money. Like there's a lot of steps that could turn some people off. But the great thing about that is from the time perspective, when people are ready and we're ready to kind of go, we're at the start of this process, like because they are leaning in so heavily to finding somebody and the timing is impeccable in their life. And if I'm worth my weight, in gold here and can deliver the types of people that they're looking for and send them out there, that the likelihood actually in the very early stages happens where they meet the right person. So time is important, right? And there is a clock that's ticking because there is a contract. So I do feel pressure, right? Because I'm like, I've got to figure this out. But if everything is lined up correctly, it actually works in everybody's favor because it happens time and time again, no pun intended. I'd say anywhere from first introduction to maybe the fourth introduction, they are in their forever committed relationship. And that could be, the first 6 months of this process.
And what is it, just so I understand, like as a matchmaker, not just your business, but matchmakers in general, what is it that if I come to you, what is the deliverable? Or like as I always think about going shark diving in South Africa and then being on a boat in a stinky wetsuit and then not seeing a shark. And at the end, they gave me a little tag. They're like, here, you get another shark ride and when you come back to South Africa, right? And so if I come to you and I'm paying you a lot of money because you're obviously good at what you do, but for whatever reason, timing or like, how does that work as a business side, right? Like, what am I paying for? What is the time? I'm just curious, like, because you can't give results, right? You're not going on the dates for them.
Right. Well, that is the thing. There is no predicting that this is going to work.
Yeah,
It is a risk. Right? There is that inherent risk and it's a gamble, right? I mean, I wish I could wave a magic wand and figure it all out and have a crystal ball and be like, yes, it will happen in 2 months. Just listen to me and do the right thing. But that's not the reality. So contractually, when you become a client, there's a guarantee of introductions. There is a window in which we're working. Typically, it's anywhere from, I'd say on the short end, maybe 10 months. It could be up to 16 months. You can freeze and unfreeze your membership, but there is that guarantee of introductions. Now, there have been situations where somebody exhausts all the introductions and there was not love at the end of, the rainbow. So they can stay on my database and be eligible for more setups where their name might populate when I'm searching for different clients, or they might realize that this was a good experience, they've gained a lot of wisdom from it, but they're going to kind of now date on their own. But it's a very collaborative experience. I'm working extremely closely with my clients. Like, it's not uncommon where, we're talking multiple times weekly and we're strategizing, we're having brainstormings. I'm presenting candidates. They're giving me feedback. I'm helping best position them for success, because like, if I'm not doing that on my end, they're going to struggle. And then ultimately they're not going to be happy. My business is not going to grow. Reputation is everything in this industry as well. So it's very kind of results driven. So the clients want that success. So strategy and open communication and transparency. Also, if I'm having a difficult time with their search, I'm going to share that with them. Right. And that's where we might, let's say 3 months in, I might have to have a tough conversation with them and just share, okay, you've been 4 matches in. We're, 3 months into this. You haven't gotten past date 2 with anybody. It's not for a lack of trying, but I think we need to go back to the drawing board and re-examine your original criteria and maybe tweak that a little bit. So this can also be about fine-tuning the science of this, which are the metrics that somebody originally defined.
Right. So
this is interesting.
Wait a second, Nadine. Let me just finish with this.
Go ahead.
So in some senses, what Nadine and I do in markets is expectations based, right? Sometimes a bad company can be a great stock, and sometimes a great company can be a bad stock, right? And so it's all about what are the expectations built into it. So what I'm hearing there is your expectations might be a large deviation from what the marketplace is telling you, and that conversation that you have to have them is like, here's where the market is. And that's really hard, right? Like, that's not. I don't envy you.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I have a client right now where, he wants one thing, but the market doesn't want him back. And that's hard because he also doesn't want to necessarily hear that, nor would I ever share that so explicitly with him. He probably gets it. And through his struggles, we're going to have to really kind of re-examine things because, this is constantly evolving. And we do have to often make those micro tweaks and sometimes larger tweaks to really examine criteria and be smart about this. Because again, the clients want this. They really want to meet somebody and we have to figure it out together.
We touched a little bit here. You commented few parts of the matchmaking process, but I want to kind of roll it back to the beginning. So when someone contacts Linx, how do you determine, because I know you don't take everybody as a client,
right?
How do you determine if they're going to be a successful client with you and your team?
Wonderful question. So I have really, I would say just kind of how I operate in general now. I mean, having done this so long, decades, is going based on gut, right? I mean, there are emails that I get that land in my inbox and I just instinctually know, oh my gosh, that person has the right DNA, the secret sauce that I want. Like, I feel it energetically, like I light up. I'm like, oh my God, like, I hope we can do this together because I can just tell. And then when I take them through my process of the ideal match criteria and they're realistic about things, I can tell that they are really respecting my process and ultimately trusting me, that I'm always going to be in their corner, but they do have to defer to the expert. Just like, I would never say, if they're in, let's say, the AI industry, I would never pretend I was an expert in AI, right? That's what they do, but they really need to kind of respect, my process and what I do in the matchmaking industry. So I think a lot of this is based on pattern recognition, that sixth sense that I have, and just sometimes knowing, right? I think a lot of it is, though, somebody who's really willing to heed my counsel, where, they go in saying, Amy, I was working even with another matchmaker prior. It was a suboptimal experience. Here's why. I'm really looking for this sort of criteria. Do you think it's realistic? And if I tell them, well, I really would like for you to, bump up that age, let's say, or bump up, religion and just be more open to different religions or personalities. And if they're really willing to listen to my advice, then I know that that's somebody that I would love to work with. When I can tell there's people that are going to have walls up emotionally, or, there's just something's kind of preventing them from being able to move forward, or there's a lot of rigidities around the science, around those metrics, and they're not willing to budge on those. It becomes almost, for a matchmaker, it's like wearing a straitjacket. And that's not a fun feeling, to be in a straitjacket. Not that I've ever been in one, but you catch the, the drift of kind of that feeling. There's a lot of creativity that goes on behind the scenes here for me at Linx, where yes, there's a science, but part of the beauty of this process, and I would like to think why people are hiring the human, is the art that I bring to the picture of when I am developing ideas. And it's a very creative process for me. It's a quirky, random process. Ideas can come to me at any time, but a lot of my long-term matches have been deviations, and in some cases, outliers, pretty extreme outliers from somebody's initial criteria that they defined. And I think a lot of us, like when we're thinking about matches, it seems very black and white, but it's a very nuanced thing. And there's a lot of gray zone that I tap into. And for the prospect who sees that and can rationalize that and says, okay, I know you got me, that I'm trusting you. That's the type of person I want to work with. Somebody who's going to try to, I've had people who are extremely analytical, talk to me where they're asking questions. They're like, okay, Amy, I'm trying to understand intuition. Can you tell me today, how many times do you think you've applied your intuition? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I have no idea. Right? Yeah.
And so, it sounds like one of the key things, not just finding who you think would be a good match, but it starts with getting to know your clients. So do you get to know them? Is it through one-on-ones? Is it visiting their spaces, like whether they're work or home? Is it talking to other people who know them? How do you get a sense of them so that you can have an accurate picture to work off?
Yes. So there's a definitely an extensive process of getting to know somebody. It starts typically from a referral from a trusted source. So somebody that I already know and like and trust, who has just referred their like-minded friends. So that's kind of step one. So based on kind of the power of the network, that is already a really great kind of qualifier. Beyond that, there's the intake questions, ideal match. So kind of all the paperwork, if you will. Usually we'll do a quick Zoom. And then for me, so much of this is achieved in person, really spending that quality time in person, whether it's having a lunch together or a dinner, breaking bread, having a conversation, getting to know them and not rushing the process. Like my sessions are generally pretty intense, where it's like you're meeting with a friend, but a friend who has a lot of science, paperwork, and who's, an expert in this field. So it's not uncommon where those conversations, getting to know somebody, can be up to 4+ hours. I mean, honestly, the time just flies. And it's not like this formalized thing or anything like that. It's more like we're really taking a wonderful deep dive into the nuances and peeling those layers back. I have been to many of my clients' homes, actually, and I love doing that because it's this powerful lens of how they operate their life, seeing their environment, what that's like. You can have an idea, but till you're actually standing in their home, in their private space, it's such a powerful thing. And talking to some family members sometimes. So I've talked to family members, friends, getting to know them. One of my female VIPs, as part of the process of her onboarding, I really encouraged her. I said, I really want to get to know you. I want to, come to your Palo Alto home. I want to go to your beach house. I also really want to talk to some of your friends, like your former college roommate, your current colleague. And she was willing to do that and kind of set up those sessions, which provided so much depth to this process. So that's something very unique. Most matchmakers are not going to do that. In fact, so this alliance that I'm part of, where we strategize and we collaborate amongst industry peers, when I have mentioned before that my intakes or my meet and greets where I do dinner or lunch with clients, new clients, can be somewhere of 4 hours, their heads are spinning like, Amy, first of all, why would you ever do that? And for me, it's like, why wouldn't I do that? Like, this is such an important process. And I want to get to know everybody. If I don't, then I can't best represent them. When I have somebody on the other end of the equation that I'm trying to place across from that client, say, well, what's he or she like? And if I can't speak coming from a place of truth, that's not a strong position for me, nor one that I would feel comfortable with.
Ben, I think your volume is off. I'm not sure what happened.
Is it better? Is it back? Okay. Sorry, I must have hit the microphone. Sorry. What we talked about earlier was how you want to know people. And when we get to know people, sometimes it takes time. And in this idea of a Zoom call, and Nadine and I can probably tell you that, like, post-COVID, when Zoom calls became a thing, I've been to a million lunches. I've lived in Manhattan a long time. Go shake a guy's hand, the CEO of a company or a broker or a trader, whatever. And like, you're like, hey, I had drinks with them. I had dinner with them. I have an experience in my head with them. I know a few jokes. Whereas in Zoom, I don't even know. Like, that doesn't even register a mental thing to me. And so you're saying like that, basically, that it's important to have that human element and to understand people. And as we move into this, and, both of you are in Palo Alto, post-humanist AI world, Zoom world, like, let's bring it back to basics of humans and let's spend extra time to get to know one another. And that's what works. Is that kind of what your thesis is of why to do that long?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bring it old school style, right? Again, do what your grandparents did. Like, let's make this a very simple science of human connection and meeting. And again, kind of time and place for everything, but remembering the context and the environment and also your audience of, who you're meeting. And get out there and meet people. On my social media, I had a video go viral, something like 6.3 million views. And it was a very simple I know, it was crazy. We started kind of spinning into the ether. And it was a very simple exercise that I did as a way to show people how to break the ice. And that's what my whole thing is in life. I walked up to a stranger and I just said, "Hi, I like your shirt. I'm Amy, by the way." And the guy was kind of stumped in the video, like, oh, kind of clueless. But the whole point is like, walking up to people, introducing yourself in life and being friendly, you open doors and windows of opportunity and you create new connections. This could be professionally, personally, romantically, platonically, whatever it is. But you have to lean into that and you have to do that in person. You're not going to do that on Zoom.
Right.
And let's process till we get to the next bit. You assess somebody, you kind of get to know them, and, they tell you what they want or what they think they want, but maybe you know better or you have a different view. What do you do in that situation? Do you kind of stick with what they said initially because you want to show that you're servicing the client? Obviously you're probably trying to work them a little bit to say, well, that's one idea. Maybe there's another idea here, using that kind of business school redirect or whatever you want to call it. But how do you deal with that? Because I would assume that because they haven't had success, they might not really understand what would be good for them, a good match. And that might be part of why they haven't found somebody.
Right. No, exactly. It's a tough situation, right? I really treat all of these cases, just situationally, case by case basis, because everybody is unique in their own set of circumstances and match preferences. I have seen in a couple of successful matches that the client came in with extreme rigidities, saying, I know exactly what I'm looking for, down to eye color, symmetry of eyes, must be a graduate of Stanford, must have been a, Stanford athlete, must have done this and that. I'm like, oh my goodness, are we serious right now? And I knew that they were serious and they were not messing around, and they're married, right? And it works. So, but I would say in most cases, if somebody came in with such extreme rigidities, I mean, it's my job to try to break that down and see really the essence of how I can help them. And that is part of my secret sauce, is synthesizing the data that somebody shares and then coming up with what I call the top 3 ranking criteria. And this criteria could be anything. I mean, it really depends on the intake and what they've shared in their ideal match document, and everybody's different for their ranking criteria, kind of what I determine. But there's always going to be somebody kind of who sneaks through the process and says, I want something in somebody so specific, I'm going to hope you can deliver. And if I realize they're not willing to, deviate at all beyond the boundaries, I have to ask myself the hard question. Is this worth it? And can I deliver, right? And ultimately, a love match, right? Or is it going to be a disaster?
It's interesting about, call it 3, whether it's preferences, must-haves, non-negotiables, you're not giving them 20, right? You're saying your eyes are on here. So for those listening and not seeing, so, why 3? And are there typical ones that people tend to choose? Like, what are they? And which ones do you think tend to be most successful? Or is it really per person dependent?
I would say it's really per person dependent. And those rankings are broad categories. And not to complicate things, but I do sub rank. So, there are 3 buckets, and these can be anything ranging from physicality, personality, financial kind of background, and, one's net worth, let's say, or industries they're working in, background in terms of previous marital status, has kids, doesn't have kids, wants kids. It's always a big thing. So it really is person specific. And then we do sub rank underneath the umbrella of each of those kind of buckets. But I would say, for women, kind of a universal truth that I see would be integrity. They're looking for a man of integrity. They're looking for a genuine, humble guy. In Silicon Valley, there's a lot of very successful women. So a guy who's not going to be intimidated by her success and think she's a badass, amazing person, and be able to kind of look at her as an equal in that regard. I'd say that that's a big thing. For men, a lot of men, the very first thing, they need to be attracted. So the physical is typically, that's the leading indicator right there. If they're not attracted, it's a moot point. And Amy, we are back to the drawing board. So that is always with men kind of the leading thing. And then we stack lovely attributes, on top of the physical, such as the personality and whatever dimensions of personality they're looking for. But everybody's so different, right? Faith, religion might be a big thing, or one's background or hobbies. That's a huge thing too.
Right. So Amy, we were talking about this before. So when we think about this, Nadine, I think about everyone wants to quantify how to trade, right? But the reality is we have tacit knowledge from built up from experience, right? We've done this for a long time. We've seen patterns and, right now the markets are crazy and we've been doing pretty well. But why is that? Because we've seen things. We know what's going on. But you don't know that in the beginning. I wouldn't have known that 20 years ago as a young grad student. Yeah. And so, you said, hey, early on, I'm relying on my model, right? But when you're really thinking about it, you've built up trust into, I can make the choice as a human. And when I hear there's a bunch of different factors with varying weights that depend on each client, that means you can't model it. It means that you maybe in this future AI, the Skynet, but the reality is right now, your brain has been trained to have the trust to know how to do this of where to match, right? Versus when you're earlier in your career, were you less confident in your ability to do that?
Absolutely. No, you absolutely hit the nail on the head with that. So now I am so relying on my pattern recognition, my brain, kind of the machine that has been well trained and honed over the decades based on thousands of intakes and conversations. Way back when I was first starting out, for the first many years, I look back at that young woman and that entrepreneur, that, starry-eyed entrepreneur starting my business. And I was so kind of adorable how much I relied on, my process, and things had to be to the nth degree. Way back when, I actually didn't have a database. I didn't have any way of organizing information. So I had flashcards. All information was on flashcards. That was my kind of crazy database. And then I wrote everything in a very specific style with a pencil, like a very specific mechanical pencil. And if I deviated at all with, these intakes with new clients at all, I was like, oh my gosh, something's not right. Now my business, the way that I match and the way that I do my intakes, it is so much more organic and free flowing based on what I have learned and honed over the years, and knowing that I can deviate from that original kind of methodology, if you will, because why wouldn't I, right? It's just, I've evolved in so many ways, which has been fascinating to see and a lot of fun.
Yeah, we just want to have trust, right? We want to trust ourselves. And I think that we do the work, whether it's, here's the characteristics and here's the modeling, in order to like have a foundation to sit on. But then there's things we can't code, but we know. And we're just like, hey, I just know because I know. You know what I mean? Like there's something that we as humans can't articulate yet. Maybe we will be able to, but this is what 20 years plus experience, gets you in your career, and why people in their 40s and 50s and 60s are valuable, because we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot of situations, right?
I'm going to switch you to, instead of the clients, the matches, right? So do you follow a similar process of getting to know the matches? You obviously have probably an exponentially larger database now than you ever did before. And if you meet certain kind of women or men, then they will have friends maybe that they can also refer in. But how do you then find the matches and get to know them?
So great question, Nadine. So the matches are definitely there. They are what I call the match candidates, and they are, for lack of a better word, they're inventory, but very valuable inventory. It's like the real estate market. It really is. Like there's a lot of similarities to that in many respects. So match candidates on any daily basis, I am getting bombarded with people who are applying to meet different clients. And a lot of those people are simply added to the database, but again, kind of instinct and me knowing kind of who's going to be the right kind of ethos and DNA for a particular client, I will flag that person and I will pass that off to my team to do an initial screen. So they'll take a Zoom with them and get to know them, ask them questions, and sometimes some kind of preemptive, almost very particular questions to determine if they're the right match. The clients in many cases come up with some particular due diligence screening questions that we then ask the different match candidates to ensure that we are kind of screening the right ones, weeding out the wrong ones, etc. And then it's not uncommon where after a Zoom, I will then do a quick in person, especially if they're in the Bay Area, and really make sure that I put my stamp of approval and I feel confident. We will then probably do a couple more check-ins with them. And the rationale behind this is if we're matching somebody to one of our clients that either applied on his or her own terms, or maybe we recruited vis-a-vis platforms like LinkedIn, we really need to ensure that they're going to take this seriously, that the timing is right for them, and that also the slate is clean and clear. I've learned the hard way where I've done matches and somebody, I do the match, my client's all, pumped up and excited. And then their respective match says, oh my gosh, I just became exclusive with somebody, or they flake and they ghost them or whatever happens. And so we really kind of go through these checks and balances to ensure that they're excited, etc. So it works in everybody's favor in that regard.
This might be a little sensitive, but given that a lot of your clients are probably financially successful, or whether it's famous or well-known or well-respected in whatever they do, like, do you need to screen for, and then maybe lack of a better term, gold diggers versus matches who are really interested in the client and the human being, and not any kind of trappings that they may have?
Absolutely. That is a huge component of this because, as you illuminated, we are working with a lot of very successful, in many cases, high profile people, or just people who have a substantial net worth. And so there is a tremendous amount of caution, I would say, for these new clients about protecting them against being matched to the wrong person, or people who choose them for the wrong reasons, or somehow kind of, slip in through the cracks and somehow meet them, and then things could backfire. So we do a lot of screening on behalf of our clients to ask certain questions to ensure that somebody is not a gold digger. One of the basic questions kind of in the intake would be, is there a certain income and or net worth you're looking for? And so let's say it's not to stereotype, but let's just say we're going to go there. A young female who's 26 years old says she's looking for a net worth of 50 million plus. Okay. So in that situation, if she's not bringing that to the equation, right, because she's high net worth herself, then obviously that is a huge flag for us and a protective mechanism where we're like, okay, we're not going to match her and place her across to that client. Although, even though we do employ a lot of screening mechanisms, I'll share a story. Recently, we were doing the due diligence for one of our lovely male clients. He's in his 40s and was looking for somebody in her early 30s or so to, start a family with one day. And, I screened somebody on his behalf and then passed that match candidate onto my team to do a couple of other screenings. And so we did collectively probably 2 phone calls and maybe 2 Zooms to really ensure we felt confident and really good about things. And so we then matched the client, made the match happen. Just so you know, actually anybody who meets a client signs a legal release. So it just kind of elevates this to even more professional. People take it more seriously in that case. So made the match. We were all kind of on the sidelines, cheering the client on, okay, I think we have something good here, crossing our fingers and our toes. And then they did an initial phone call. And then the match candidate, wrote me and she said, I just don't think that this is a match. She said, he's given me kind of information to lead me to believe that he's not successful enough. And I pushed back. I said, I'm sorry, but my client is successful. But more so than that, shouldn't you be focused on other attributes other than his success? He's actually a really good guy, genuine, humble. The list goes on. I said, just have another call with him, right? Just get to know each other. Stop focusing on the wrong things. So she did another call, then came back to me again and said, he's not a match. I said, well, why? Did he say something shocking? What happened? And she said, well, he rents. He's not even a homeowner. And I'm looking for a man with multiple residences. I was like, girl, okay, you're working with the wrong matchmaker here then. That to me was indication I will never set that person up again. And somehow, even though the humans did the screening, she did slip through the cracks. And in that case, I did not count that as a match for this client because that's on us, right? But I was shocked. She was so just explicit about that. I was like, okay, girl, that is
early on, it sounds like. So for you and the client, it's good to get that out after the beginning area time frame and not 5 months down the line.
I mean,
oh my gosh.
Amy, how much of an issue is ego for you? I found as somebody who had a bit of an ego when I was young and destroyed that ego as I got older, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. But sometimes people who've had a lot of success, and I know in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of people who have not had their ego tested. And the truth is we die with as much money as we were born with. So money isn't really what makes us happy that people think it does. How much of an obstacle to success for your business is ego?
I mean, I have to remove my ego, right? I have to, this business is about getting along with everybody. You have to play nice in the sandbox with all sorts of personalities, introverts, extroverts, narcissists, big egos, small egos, all sorts of people, right? People that are shy, people that are nervous. I mean, whatever's happening in their life, I have to get along with them, remove all of that, right? I become kind of just this vessel of information and here to help and serve my clients. But I deal with really big egos.
That's what I meant more. Their ego. How much is their ego the obstacle?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I've dealt with such big egos for such a long time that I just kind of throw that out. I really look past that. I'm looking past that because I want that big ego person to be really happy with my services, to then kind of use their big ego megaphone to tell their friends about Linx, right? So that for me, it's kind of I just throw that out, the window, unless it becomes detrimental or unless that turns on me and becomes bullying or the person's actually not a good person, that I wouldn't work with that person, right? And that's why we do kind of our first professional date, that meet and greet, just to see if we can get along and, they like me and vice versa.
You have to deny applicants. I'm not going to ask you for a denial rate, but you have to say, hey, you know what? Look, I don't like a lawyer might, right? Hey, I don't want to take your case on it. I mean, in some ways, what you do is similar to a lawyer. It's a service, best efforts, right? High service, you have to sometimes say no, I guess, right?
I say no every day. So I say no more than I say yes.
Wow.
So I actually, because keep in mind, I'm only working with up to 10 clients at any given time. So there's a lot of people that do want to become a client that I feel either my plate is full, right? And I literally have to put them on a wait list, or I just know in my heart of hearts I can't serve them. So the great thing actually is I never leave anybody feel rudderless. I always refer them out to another firm that I trust and I like, and I think could be the best appropriate match for them professionally. So yeah, I say no all the time.
I love
People like
specifics. Okay, so you have a client, you've worked with the client, they've got some headshots, body shots, all kinds of things, spoofed up as much as you can spoof them up. And then you've got the match or potential match, right? What is your advice to both of them for the first date? So we'll get to the second, third, fourth in a second, but for the first date, what's the advice?
keep it simple. Keep it simple. I mean, the format generally through Linx is a dinner date. And I know that's going to like some of your listeners in your audience might be like, oh my God, that's such a heavy lift and so intense. But this is about courtship and chivalry, right? This is about for women, putting something on in terms of like clothing that makes you feel beautiful and also reminds you that you are going out on a date and you are about to meet somebody that said yes to meeting you. It genuinely wants to get to know you. And for men, it means, leaning into the chivalry and being the gentleman. And that's what women, another universal truth, women are looking for that. Chivalry is not dead. People want that. So, but, when they are on that date, just keeping it simple. Conversation should be quite, I'd say, surface level, right? Where it's touching on certain points, trying to lean into that flirty energy a little bit without compromising one's authenticity, right? It's about having fun. The energy should be light, easy, breezy. Whatever that means to somebody, make that happen and actualize that. Come up for the first date with a few different kind of topics that you can talk about that is not work, because it is so easy for all of us, I'm sure, to default into work mode. And then all of a sudden it's a business meeting and not a date, right? So it's really important to kind of have some, what I call expert subjects. And that maybe if somebody's like really into wine, that they can almost kind of like teach their respective date about a few interesting things about the wine industry or the wines they love, or when they were on a wine tour, what that was like, and kind of sharing some stories through their narrative, right? So I would say that is kind of the first date. And then I will share one of the most important things for both parties to do on date one, and this is what a lot of people fail to do because they're scared of doing it, is give a verbal affirmation. So this means somewhere, I'd say in the middle of the date, give it, like for the female, give a verbal affirmation that if in her heart of hearts, she believes he's a nice guy, he's cute enough, he seems like an honest person, and she thinks she wants to see him again, let him know. Now, you don't have to be as explicit as that, but to say something to the effect of, this is really fun. I didn't know what to expect, but I'd love to see you again. Gives him a signal in the right direction. Without this information, without that signal, guys are adorably clueless. They don't know, right? So
Wait, I'd like to, as representing the men, I do know what I'm doing.
please.
And I'll just tell you what works. Okay. Exhibit humility.
Set up.
Exhibit
I got my
humility.
popcorn here. I cannot wait.
Exhibit humility. Look, I'm just saying, like, women, very popular
Yeah.
women. So here we go. Exhibit humility. Like, that works. Make fun of yourself. If you make fun of yourself and you don't let, like, hey, I'm the best, like, make fun of yourself. Be willing to say, hey, I'm wrong.
Totally.
Be willing to admit when you're wrong. Willing to say, I'm sorry. That, by the way, it's a Wisconsin sorry with that long O. Like, you just want to be a human and make them think you're a human. Not that you're better than them. Just be somebody and make people laugh. That's the one other thing. If you can make people laugh, that will work. All the physical stuff is just kind of an entry strike price of like, hey, do I want to get involved with this? But that's not a sustainable thing, right? In my opinion, like, what's sustainable is, can we laugh? Can we have fun? Can I be an idiot and you still like be like, it's okay? Like, that's the stuff that works. And you have to get through that stuff.
Exactly. No, I love that you said that. I think that the levity, the humor, and just the realness the authenticity and just kind of the humanness of this becomes extremely important, right? Where it's like you kind of, that veneer comes off, right?
Exactly.
And you just, again, light, easy breezy, laugh. Don't take yourself so seriously. I see a lot in Silicon Valley of the peacocking,
Yeah,
all
it
the
doesn't
flashy,
work. No one wants
colors.
that. No one wants that. Like,
No
you know
one
what?
wants that.
Driving
People
an orange
think they want that.
Lamborghini is the number one way to be like, hey, you have a small penis, right? Like, that's the number one way to do it. Like, what are we talking about? I mean, I know that's a little explicit, but it's true. Like
Yeah.
it's ridiculous.
A Tesla, what do you call it?
Cybertruck?
The monster truck.
Yeah.
But anyways,
But coated in like gold or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
I'm going to be, what should people be wearing on the first date? Is this a fancy dinner or a casual dinner? What should clients be doing?
Maybe something that makes you feel attractive, right? I know. No,
my friend, and it's funny. So I had some people over last night, and she was new to dating, and she said, my biggest mistake, I was treating it like a LinkedIn coffee meeting. Because coffees, that sounds like, you're going to do a deal like with a VC. Like, go to a dinner, go out for a drink. What are you doing? So
yeah, that's great advice.
So we were laughing about that. I was like, they shouldn't be treating like this like a LinkedIn meeting.
No.
Be like, you're going on a date. So treat it like a date.
Well, Nadine, it's funny that you bring LinkedIn up because I have gotten a lot of feedback from both men and women where they'll say to me, I just got a LinkedIn request from, a date. And I'm like, wow, that's kind of like, again, people are confused. What we were talking about earlier, like how to act, how to date, how to behave in the context of dating. So don't send LinkedIn requests. Don't do the LinkedIn kind of coffee meetup thing. I think in terms of attire, it depends on the environment, right? But I think anything that makes you feel attractive and, stepping out of your work clothes. So that means like give yourself that time and space to actually prepare for the date. Like groom yourself, right? Like take a shower after your work day, put something else on that's not the outfit that you wore for your Zoom meetings or your coffee meetings, and put yourself in the right mentality. It's less about kind of the appearance of like, oh, I'm wearing this dress or I'm wearing this skirt and blouse. And it's more the mental game, right? Because if you're mentally prepared for that, you're going to be more in that kind of mode of like, I got this. And we're going to keep this light and laugh and have fun.
So let's say the first date goes well. The potential match gives the cues. The suitor did a job preparing, took a shower, maybe smelled good even, and they have a next date set up. Do you have advice for the second, third, fourth dates? Like they be doing something? Is it, another dinner or what is the progression that you recommend for people?
I like to see, especially if somebody hits it off, that they, again, affirmations, there's that clear signal from both parties that they'd like to see each other again. And then for the gentleman to be consistent with his communication. By the way, for all the men listening, women love consistency with communication. That is one of the biggest things in the world. It's attractive. It's appealing. We feel safe. We feel seen, heard, all the things. So just please, if you say you're going to call on a Wednesday at 10 p.m., call us Wednesday at 10 p.m. Don't call Thursday night or something, Thursday at 3 p.m. Just be consistent and keep it simple.
Can support that. Like, I'm not the most consistent. I'm a little bit like I like to think about markets and crazy stuff, but that is one thing that has been a common complaint in my life is like women love consistency. I completely agree with you on that.
We do. So remember that the next time, like be consistent because women, there's something very comforting to that, especially in a world of inconsistencies with all the guys who are not consistent from dating apps. Like for the guy who is consistent, he's going to elevate his status to a higher level and be a more desirable candidate and be a stronger potential suitor, and he's going to be kind of in the front running for these women. I think though, in terms of environments and different dates, after date one, I think it's nice to do interactive things. I think it's really fun to do like a hike together. Don't do anything too strenuous. I've had people give feedback like, oh my God, like we hiked this crazy elevation in the blazing sun and dripping in sweat. I felt hideous. So again, be sensitive with the environment and don't do something, at such an extreme level, just maintain some balance. But I think kind of shifting up the environment is nice, whether it's a walk and a coffee. People have done cooking classes together, wine tastings together, all sorts of things to just kind of shake things up and also see the respective date in a different environment, right? Because what I would tell any of my clients is keep a dating journal. So as you are going out there in the world and dating, whether it's through links or friend setups or dating apps, you're keeping a dating log and almost like a wonderful journal of the different things you're picking up on in the real world, right? He said this, or at the end of the day, how did he make me feel? God, he made me feel really good about myself. So write that down, right? Or he commented that he didn't like my hair. Well, write that down. That's whatever it is, right? Or on road rage, when we drove to do that wine tasting, he was speeding and then he was honking like a crazy person. But I think I'll give him a chance because he seems nice. But please write that down, right? Because you're going to then see patterns maybe and pick up on, all these variables and data will give you clarity to help you decide who to choose and who to eliminate from the running.
Let me ask you this, Amy. So Nadine and I have different views about this, and you're an expert. So I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think about taking a girl on a trip as a first date?
No.
Thank you. It's
I
the
can
whole
refute
idea.
that because my current girlfriend, my first trip was to Mexico City.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love that worked for you, but I do think by and large, that's a very risky gamble, right? I think that it's such a heavy lift and there's a lot that goes with that, such as, just housing. Like, are you getting her own room? Like expectations, like it can go south really fast. But I do think doing those amazing coupley things early on is cool. But at the same time, my whole philosophy is no intimacy. So don't sleep together till there's exclusivity. So if you're exclusive, it's all fair game. But until then, don't go there.
Right.
So these are sensitive topics, right? And so that was helpful to know for
This is fun, though.
exclusivity.
This is actually I'm loving this podcast. It's so different than anything we've ever done. This is fantastic.
Should two people kiss? Like, do you coach clients about that? Do you leave it up to them? Like, you're talking about intimacy here, and I'm sure this is a conversation that most people don't talk about with other people. But what's your advice to your clients and maybe the
Yeah, no, you're so right. I mean, it is context kind of specific and so sensitive and depends on the circumstances and somebody's history up until that point, right? So it really is situational. But I think like anything in life, like when something feels right, and maybe that is at the end of the first date, I think that's cute. Why not? If that feels natural, then go there, right? With that sweet desire that this was lovely. I look forward to this again, and then part ways. Like, don't keep like hanging out and don't like have that escalate physically to the next level, please. So, but I think if it feels natural to just kind of for the first 3 dates, stay in this almost friend zone, then that is okay. But then at a certain point to kind of signal that, you're looking at them a little bit differently, right? With desirous eyes and see if they match you with that desire, right? And kind of lean into that. And hopefully, at a certain point, the new couple will feel comfortable going there. But honestly, everybody is very, very specific. Like one of my married couples, he had come out of a really acrimonious divorce, was very, very scarred and, had a lot of pain around kind of this process that was going on for many years. And the woman I matched him to had a failed engagement, and she had a lot of kind of fear built up around everything. There was the desire to meet each other. On the other hand, there was a lot of fear kind of pulling them back. And I think trepidation about getting hurt, and also really the desire to kind of build trust with each other. So I actually went in and I said to both of them, listen, I'm going to go really kind of Victorian times here, but I want you both to start as friends, and you are not permitted to do anything other than hand holding for the first 3 months.
Wow.
And they said, are you serious? And I said, I'm so serious. And they said, oh my God, this is totally bizarre, but we're going to kind of go with your rules, Amy. And so it was actually a beautiful courtship of literally old school hand holding Disney ratings of, walking around the park, holding hands, la, 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 butterflies and daisies and all that stuff. But they really started with this incredible friendship built on trust and respect. And then after 3 months, they looked at each other and they're like, my gosh, like I am so attracted to you. And they never led with that. It was about so many other things, which was really important for them. And also for this newfound couple to, and this is something that I tell all of my emerging couples to do. They really dealt with the heavy topics early on. They addressed the elephant in the room. They talked about finances. They talked about religion, parenting, all these kind of icky, heavier topics that a lot of people like to shove under the rug because, they're difficult. They're uncomfortable at times, but they went there holding hands. And then after they kind of addressed those, they realized we're so attracted to each other and let's have this fabulous weekend away. That's what they did. And they elevated the relationship to the next level, kind of in their rocket ship.
Do you find that people who are later, so either divorced and so on phase 2, as I like to call it, or like just older and like maybe, hey, I took my career really seriously and now I want to get in a relationship. And I have a number of friends. Hey, look, as a Manhattan guy, I have a lot of Peter Pan friends, the Peter Pan Club, if you've ever heard of that.
Of course.
And I'm sure some of them might be your clients. But versus when you're young and you're 28 and you're 30, like I was with my ex-wife, it's just like, hey, we're having fun. This is great. Career's going well. You're not like worrying about a plan of like what we're going to do. You know what I mean? So like, I feel like that younger love versus the older love, there's a little bit more of a Disney naivete when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm planning for the next 20, like when we're 40 to 50, we're not under any illusions like we are when we're 30, right? We're like,
right.
Hey,
right.
My setup is important to the equation in essence, right?
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, I would hope that somebody in their 40s and 50s and 60s has great command of self and clarity of what they seek, either through the experiences up until that point in their life, so they can kind of actualize that and understand who they are and what they're looking for, and or because they've done work, they've put in the hard work of therapy and in coaching, whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's completely different circumstances and a very different lens at which somebody kind of looks at, love and mating and relationships and courtship, in your 20s as compared to, midlife, right?
Yeah.
And before we end, I just want to go back to some trends and get your views on it, right? And that is about, the historical one of older men with younger women, and then nowadays it seems to be a trend is older women with younger men, or younger men looking for older women, which is really the twist on it, right?
Yes. Well, I think it's all kind of fair game. And we've seen so many different iterations of younger men looking for older women and older women looking for the younger guys. And I think that what I have seen in Silicon Valley, that happens actually with a fair amount of women of a certain kind of status and net worth where they were in a long marriage and there was great things about it, but things that sucked as well. And now they are finding flight in this new chapter. And they're like, you know what? I want to have a romance with a young guy who's hot because I was not attracted and didn't have sex with my ex for 20 years. So if they want that, amazing, right? And they often will do that before Linx and kind of get that out of their system because they know that that's not a equitable match typically, right? Because there's just such a disproportion is socioeconomically, experience-wise, friends-wise, different friend circles, just so many different things. But that's the exciting thing to kind of experience and then have that clarity about what somebody's looking for. So there is that. There's certainly the older guy, younger woman, which is always going to be the case. Like, irrespective of geography, right? That's happening all throughout the world.
Yours at which you're like, you know what, those are different generations and it just doesn't work? Or do you think that it can be anything? Or you're kind of like the sweet spot is a certain range?
Yeah. I mean, I think the sweet spot is a certain range that is realistic enough. Maybe the delta is, an 8-year delta, but we're not talking about a 20-year delta. Right now, I will say I do have some matches that are long-term matches where there's, for 3 or maybe 4 of my marriages, 16-year delta, right? Older man, younger woman. So these are guys sometimes in their 60s fishing in the 40-something pond. And that became one of their rigidities, right? And I realized they weren't willing to budge, and it works, right? So again, everybody who comes to this process has their own set of preferences. And it's really me making sure that they're a good person and I can work with them and we're going to have fun working together, because this is also, it's a professional relationship, but at the same time, it should be fun. Like, we should have a really good chemistry.
Element, which, surprised me, of how much is out there these days is polyamory, ENF. Mm-hmm. Do you have clients coming in looking for that? Or are you looking for just the one-on-one relationships as client of yours? I guess, number one, talking about it via Linx. And then number two, about it being prevalent now than at least that people knew about decades ago. And is that something that works or doesn't work? Your views on it would be really interesting, I think, for people.
Absolutely. So when I started my business, I didn't know anything about that, right? That subject. And I've really seen that kind of intensify over the years, because that kind of niche sort of relationship has really, really kind of come into, I think, a little bit more of the mainstream. I have a lot of women that will come to me to either be part of the database or clients and just be like, are there any guys left that desire monogamy one-on-one? And I'm like, actually, that's what we do here at Linx. So Linx is very much about heterosexual matchmaking, and it is one-on-one. It is for people that are seeking a monogamous long-term relationship. If that long-term results in marriage, or if it just becomes a long-term commitment, that's lovely. But out there in the ether, especially with dating apps, it is not uncommon for a couple to present themselves seeking a additional partner. So I think, poly is amazing for people that are looking for that and know that that would work for them. I'm not familiar with that just because that's not my kind of bailiwick or territory, but I think people who have done that and seek that, there's a lot of choices out there to kind of participate within that community.
So we could spend hours with you. In fact, I think we've already spent a good hour and a half. And foremost, I want to thank you for sharing all of your wisdom and experience with us and our listeners today. And to mention where people can find you, because I have a feeling after this, you're going to get a lot of searching for your services. And dating, it's Linx dating.com. Do I have that right?
Exactly.
Social, you have Instagram. Is it Ms.Linx Dating?
Yes, Ms.Linx Dating, ms.linxdating.
Great. And I know on your dating site, that people can join the database for free, or I would say shoot you an email, but I'm worried that you're going to get too many crazy emails. Anyways, find the database on her website. You never know what occurs. And if you're interested in exploring client membership, you can find Amy and the team there. Thank you again so much, Amy. This is fascinating. And we really appreciate you taking the time out with us today.
Oh, well, my pleasure. I feel, to your point, we could talk for hours and just scratch the surface. So we'll have to do another one.